Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 250.
Don't say that yet. Faster. Right.
Eungum nodded his head with a smile on his face. This feels so good. The effectiveness of the heavenly violet pill was truly shocking. This is why such pills are called pills. The energy in the hands of the disciples moving their swords couldn't be compared to how it had been before. If even their instructor Eungum had become startled by their improvement, wasn't it obvious as to exactly how effective the pill had been? Of course, Eungum had also taken the pill along with the others, but the pill seemed to have a greater effect on the younger ones. Otherwise, how could they be this energetic? Wing! Sword key! Eungum's eyes were shocked when he saw the tips of the swords of some of his disciples shine. Oh my! Of course, it wasn't too great. Even if it was Baekchun, he wouldn't have been able to do it that easily. Chongmyung's mouth hurt so much as he trained them. However, it was amazing that these normal disciples were unconsciously able to draw out even a little bit of sword ki during their training. Didn't this mean that the level of his disciples had risen? Mount Hua is growing. It was difficult for Eungum to calm his mind. Tonight, it felt like he could drink for a long time. This is all because of him, Chongmyung. How absurd had he felt when Chongmyung came up to him in the beginning and asked if he could train the disciples. He would never forget the feeling he felt when the youngest one took charge of their training, beating down his sayongs and training them. It was the right choice. His answer was to entrust the third-class disciples to Chongmyung, and that one small decision that he had taken then eventually gave them these results. He watched the disciples grow stronger every day, and seeing this development made his stomach full without even eating. But Eungum's face darkened. He could think of one problem. Eungum, who was looking at the disciples in anguish in front of him, opened his mouth with a sigh. Everyone, continue to practice. Yes! As soon as he heard their loud response, Eungum started moving. He was going to the sect leader's residence. Eungum looked at Hyunjung with a slightly awkward expression. I cannot get used to this. Eungum kept smiling awkwardly as he looked at Hyunjung, who looked as if he had turned 20 years younger. Of course, it wasn't strange since he knew how he looked in the past. It is strangely different from back then. Wasn't it said that people turn a lot more clear-headed as they get older? But here, the sect leader had become younger. Well, it was definitely a change that was difficult to describe. Right. So what happened? Hyunjung looked at Eungum with a slightly surprised look. Unlike Eunam, who constantly came over for every other thing, Eungum would only visit when there was an actual reason to. This was expected since Eungum was given the role of looking after and teaching the disciples. As such, Eungum made a request for a joint meeting that included not just the sect leader, but the other elders as well. As a result, Hyunjung seemed to be a little nervous to hear the contents of Eungum's reason for visit. Sect leader. Yes, Eungum. I have no more sword techniques to teach the disciples. Hyunjung frowned. What do you mean? The disciples are growing day by day, and there is nothing I have left to teach them. The second-class and third-class disciples have already been taught the way of the sword. On top of the basics, the 7 plum swords technique, which had been recently recovered, was taught to them as well. Right. Normally, we would move to the next one. Hyunjung let out a sigh. Right. We don't have a next one. Basically, the students of the most famous sects were taught all their best techniques before they turned 30. However, there was no such thing in Mount Hua. Among the swordsmanship techniques that had been handed down to Mount Hua, the 7 plum swords technique was the most outstanding one. In the past, it used to be a technique that was passed down before the disciples learned the 24 movement plum blossom sword technique. Eungum coughed. Since the disciples were able to take the heavenly violet pill and develop further, even if they fully began to absorb the key of the pill, we can never consider it as them perfectly mastering it. And now, they didn't have to listen to know the rest. The children, with stronger bodies, wouldn't be satisfied with the sword techniques of the past. The thirst for a stronger technique would come. Hyunjong sighed as he understood all the circumstances. What do I do? If it had been the Mount Hua of the past, he wouldn't have had to worry. He would have taught the children the 24-movement plum blossom technique himself. It was the technique that was known to be the essence and soul of Mount Hua. Of course, it wasn't the end of the techniques in the sect, but every disciple aimed to perfect their sword techniques. But the current sect had lost all traces of their swordsmanship. Right, this problem. What do you plan to do? Hyunjong grunted with a slightly annoyed voice. This was something that he hadn't wanted to remember. But now, it was something he couldn't turn away from. Hyunjong was troubled. A sword technique. Eungum had simply stated that the disciples wouldn't grow without new techniques, that they would start becoming dissatisfied, and that it was important to add new things for the sect. Ultimately, if Mount Hua was to regain its past glory, then it needed to be done with a rejuvenation of their sword techniques. How could a sword sect rank up without a strong technique? We cannot turn away from this anymore. We have postponed this far too many times, but we now have to find a way. At Hyunjong's words, everyone nodded with serious faces. If you have an opinion, don't hesitate to tell me. It is fine. Yes, sect leader. Everyone began to think, but no one could come up with an answer. Hyunsang was the first one to speak. Sect leader. Yes, speak. This is just my opinion, but instead of looking for something we lost, how about inventing a new type of martial arts? Invent? Hyunjong frowned. Will that even work? I know it will be difficult, but it is a lot easier than going after a lost technique.
Sayong, how can you say that?
Hyunjong asked. Is there anything that is impossible? You're saying this after we got over the problem of the pill.
Did Sayong make it?
Hyunjong was angry.
Don't mistake what Chongmyung did as something we did. Making the pill isn't something that Mount Hua did. It was all Chongmyung holding the burden by himself and playing the drums constantly for us with his hands and feet. And Sayong is acting so proud, like you did it.
Hyunsang went red with embarrassment.
And since when did this invention of martial arts become something? And who will make it? You or Eungum?
Eungum avoided Hyunjong's gaze.
Are martial arts a joke to you? Even if all of us decide to sit and make something, do you think we can even come up with a single technique? We won't even be able to come up with the 6th equilibrium sword technique. If a technique is that easy to make, then even the Shaolin sect should be able to use our techniques as their own.
Hyunsang bowed and then coughed before he continued. I'm not saying that I will restore the 24-movement plum blossom sword technique. What I want is just a slightly better technique than the 7 plum. But then he didn't complete it and just mumbled the rest. Right. It was because he understood that he had gone too far. Hyunjong looked at Hyunjong and said,
This won't do. Call for Chongmyung.
Huh? Why Chongmyung?
He is the one who managed to get the technique for us in the past. So if we give him a pickaxe or something, he will dig around and pull out the 24-movement plum blossom sword technique, right? Or something similarly huge.
The scariest thing about Hyunjong's words was that he seemed to really trust that this would work. Hyunjong trembled when he understood that Hyunjong wasn't messing around. He was worried whether this man would make Chongmyung into a deity. Chongmyung isn't a goblin, so how can he get things done that quickly?
If a goblin sees Chongmyung, it will call him Hyung, and he might be a real goblin too. Take a look at what happened this time too. Didn't he bring us that pot right away? Even a goblin cannot do that.
No, that... Hyunjong, who was trying to speak, went stiff. Wait. And his face changed several times in a short moment. The cold iron. Right. Call him.
Huh?
Hyunjong looked at Hyunjong like he couldn't understand. Go and call Chongmyung, right now. Yes. Eungum walked out right away with shock written all over his face.
A new martial art?
Yes. Chongmyung had a subtle change in expression.
So it wasn't like they weren't thinking about it either.
Chongmyung was also thinking about a new technique. Judging from their words, it seemed as though even the elders were thinking about a new technique to teach the disciples. Still, he was trying to think of how he could deliver the 24-movement plum blossom sword technique to Mount Hua without raising too many questions.
But why are you telling me this?
He couldn't act obviously.
Chongmyung, take a pickaxe and dig here and there. We never know what will come out.
Hyunsang closed Hyunyung's mouth. And then he subdued the man. Hyunsang felt sorry for Chongmyung.
We could have solved it easily.
That isn't how it works. So the thing is, Chongmyung.
Yes.
Hyunjong looked at Chongmyung and asked, You know, that cold iron pot? Chongmyung flinched.
Why is he bringing that up now?
No. Did you make it?
Huh?
Chongmyung responded as though he didn't understand the question and shook his head.
How do I?
Wasn't it cut and bent?
Yeah, that is true.
Chongmyung nodded. It would have been an epic loss if the man asked how he got the iron, but he didn't seem to be directly asking it. Then you didn't cut down the iron.
What are you saying? I am Chongmyung.
Chongmyung had no intention of hiding things. After all, there must have been reports of him going against the head of the Tang family, and even accounts of him taking down the elder of the Tang family too. So, he should enjoy. Right, the iron. You can cut down the bloody hard cold iron. That is the point. Seeing Hyunjong with a bright smile, Chongmyung tilted his head.
Where is he going with this?
Hyunjong exclaimed. I kept it a secret all this time, but there are multitudes of notes of Mount Hua which have been kept hidden by the sect leaders for generations.
Huh?
Does such a place exist? Unfortunately, the method to open the door is lost to the past. Since I didn't get to learn it and the door was so strong, I couldn't even touch it till now.
Really?
There was a lot of expectation on everyone's faces. It was because they could understand what Hyunjong was saying. If it was a warehouse that only the sect leaders had used, then generations worth of important things must be in there. Then there was a high chance that different martial arts copies would be in there too, along with the 24-movement plum blossom sword technique. Then, if we open the door...
Right, Chongmyung said he cut the cold iron down.
Everyone was focused on Chongmyung now. However, Chongmyung, who received all this attention, was contemplating.
Sect leader, the warehouse?
Right.
How do you want to open it?
Cut it and enter, since you can cut cold iron.
Such a good thought.
Chongmyung was trying to think.
This is bad. I just cut down a part of it from the inside and used it as a pot.
And then he smiled.
I am ruined. Sect leader Sayoung, save me.